McLachlan, welcome to Australian Musician.
Why, thank you.
Let's go way, way back.
Yeah.
What was your very first instrument? Was it a guitar or a bass?
It was a ukulele, actually. Yeah, I think I started playing ukulele when I was about 7 or 8 years old. My father was a musician and he had a bass player from England and he played the banjo ukulele and he used to do all those George Formby songs. And so he showed me the first few basic chords of a ukulele and I never looked back. I had a guitar by the time I was 10 or 11 and had my own band called Rogers Dodgers, Beatles cover band, you know. And then I started dabbling in bass around about 13, 14. My father bought me a Hofner bass, actually. It wasn't a Beatle bass, but it was a Hofner bass. And so I started playing both, you know, bass, guitar. I had piano lessons, kind of formal piano lessons as a young boy, but I didn't take to that too well.
So when was the first time you actually noticed bass in music rather than just songs?
Oh, I think by the time I was, you know, 10, 11, 12, I had the ability to listen to songs and figure out what they were doing. I didn't know what the names of the chords were, but I could hear where they were. I'd go to the piano and I'd figure out what they were doing or just listen, you know. I mean, there weren't YouTube videos and none of that stuff around. So, and my father was a piano player and he loved boogie woogie. So I've thought about this because people have asked me this question a lot. And he loved boogie woogie, he had a very strong driving left hand. And I think I've subconsciously picked up from that. Yeah.
So as you got into it, who were the bass heroes and what did you like about them?
Well, you know, Beatles, for sure, that they were a huge influence and still are. I mean, I still go back and listen to McCartney lines and go, wow. I wonder what possessed him to play that, you know. Yeah. Still listening to McCartney. I mean, look, there's a bunch of every other bass player, and it's not just bass players. I mean, I these days I listen to everything. I listen to sax players, I listen to piano players, guitar players, and I probably play more guitar at home these days. But anything I hear on guitar, I always try and figure, how can I play this part on bass, you know, so... Yeah. Everything influences me, absolutely everything. Yeah.
So it was Godspell, the musical, that brought you to Australia?
It was, yeah. Look, the show was travelling through New Zealand. They ended up in Invercargill, and I'd heard through the grapevine that the bass player was leaving, and they had half Kiwi. They had a Kiwi bass player, guitarist, and I think Rodney Kendall was the MD piano player. And the drummer, oh, it won't come to me. No, it won't come to me. And he left, so I went and auditioned and I got the gig. I mean, I couldn't read anything. I went to the show the night before and listened because I had a really good ear and kind of remembered some of the songs, you know, got up there and auditioned with the piano in my lunch break because I had a day job, you know. I did all right until I got to the song that was in 5/4 and it was just no chord symbols, it was just dots on the paper. And at that point I fell apart, yeah. I got found out. And the keyboard player turned to me and he said, what's going on? How come you're not playing that very well? I said, well, I have to come clean, I really don't read. He said, well, how come you played the other song so well? I said, well, I saw the show last night and I remembered it. And he went, you got the job. He made a decision right there and then. The fact that I rattled through the other songs pretty easy. He figured I'd better play the other ones, you know, just learn them. Yeah.
One of the early opportunities you had was pretty massive, Little River Band. Tell me about the audition for that.
Well, it was amazing. I mean, I came across that was so I did that, just to backtrack, I did that the last end of that New Zealand tour and then went back to my day job, had a cover band doing gigs and that. And I got a telegram from Rodney saying, would you like to come to Australia for 6 months and tour New South Wales, Victorian country, and 3 months in Perth? Yep. So I went up to Dunedin, bought my first Fender bass, which I still own, and did that tour. And then I came back to back to Melbourne, settled in Melbourne for a while, kind of had a band. Went to an agent, Geoff Skews actually, who had an agency looking for work, and he said, look, we don't represent cover bands, we only do original bands. He said, but And I knew Geoff through Skylight. I don't know whether you remember Skylight. They were like a funk soul band. And he said, look, I know of a band called Mississippi. They've just come back from England. They're auditioning bass players. So I went up there and auditioned, and that was an amazing experience. I remember it vividly, like walking into this, it was the front lounge room of Derek Polici's parents' place in Camberwell. And so everyone was there. Derek with his big white kit, Rick Famosa had just joined the band. So it was Rick Beeben. They all had fabulous guitars and fabulous amplifiers, and Glenn Shorrock, of course. And so I remember Graham saying, oh, look, we've got this song called It's a Long Way There. And he said, look, we'll just start playing it, you know, and join in, see what you come up with. And, well, the rest is history. They started playing it, and I just started playing a riff, which is the riff that bass riff pattern that I play on. That's the one I came up with on the spot. It's kind of blues, loosely blues-based, you know, the choice of notes. So we rattled through it, and we rattled through a few other tunes, and I have to say it was just amazing. I realised I was in a room, I was in the presence of very fine musicians, great players, great singers. It was like I'm kicking myself, I'm pinching myself, going, because I was very much into the Doobies and the Eagles, and so this was a country rock harmony band. It was like all my prayers had been answered. So I did the audition. I remember speaking to Graham out the front of the house, and he said, look, we're thinking of auditioning one more guy from Sydney. And I boldly, 21 years old, boldly said, oh, you don't want to do that. I want the gig, Save yourself the money flying someone down. So I was a bit cheeky. I put my hand up for the gig, And I don't think they said yes then, but I think I got a phone call or a telegram or something, the next day saying I got the gig. And the rest is history, It was like, wow, we're off and running, doing gigs. And all of a sudden I'm in the studio recording an album, It was a real whirlwind. It was amazing.
Yeah. You were with the band for 3 years?
Yeah, the first 2 albums, yeah.
And can I ask why you left?
Well, you can. I never used to say much about it, but I got the flick. I got the boot. Mind you, I proudly wear that as a badge of honour because a lot of people have been through that band. And I realise now that the band was driven by Graham Goebel. It was really, he was just full. I mean, they all were. They were on a mission to go to America and conquer America after going to England like so many bands had done previously and broken up, fallen over, come back to Australia with a tail between their legs. So yeah, look, Graham was pretty driven about what he wanted and how he wanted to go about it. I just got a phone call one day from the funny thing is that I'd been up in Sydney with Glenn Shorrock doing promotional videos and television, radio promotion for an upcoming tour or for something. And of course, unbeknownst to me and Glenn at the time, that they were auditioning bass players. How that kind of happened was that Rick Famosa had decided to leave the band. And so they went to see David Briggs play in a band up in Carlton. And when they walked in to see Briggsy play, beside him was George McArdle, the left-handed bass player. And they kind of went, well, yeah, we'll have the guitar player, but what about this bass player? So I for some reason they weren't happy with my playing, who knows. And in hindsight, when I heard what George was playing, I realised that I needed to kind of step up a little bit. He was playing fretless bass and he was slapping a bit, and I wasn't doing any of that. I was kind of still playing with a pick and a little bit of fingers, so he was kind of moving into the uncharted territory of slapping and stuff,
And then you went to Stars, which is not a bad band to...
Well, no, it was great because Beeb had discovered Stars when we used to play at in Adelaide. They supported us, and Beeb saw the band and went, man, this band's great. I want to record them. So he got them a deal with Kaninsky, and he did some recording, their first single, I think he did. And so round about that time, me leaving LRB, Stars were looking at moving to Melbourne, and they'd had a couple of bass players floating, and I think possibly through B, because he produced one of their singles. I just don't know exactly how that came up, but they asked me to join the band, which I did, and we recorded that the Paradise album, which was great because the engineer was Ross Cockle, who'd engineered the first two LRB albums, and of course Rick Famosa's on the other side of the glass producing, you know. So it was kind of familiar territory, you know, back in the same studio that I'm with, Studio 2, AAV, you know.
Another band in the early days, Pyramid, was... I don't know that Australia had seen a fusion band of that quality before Pyramid.
You know, Sydney had Crossfire, Melbourne had Pyramid, you know, and that kind of came about in the early 80s after doing Stars. Look, I'd been out on the road for years, you know, having a great life, but not making much money. No money in it, being out on the road in the early 70s, you know. And you read all the biographies, you know, everyone was on TV with gold records on the wall, but no money. So I made a conscious decision to get into sessions and become a session player. So about 78, 79 sessions. And I just did sessions, you know, kind of developed my reading skills a bit better, you know. And then got an offer to join Pyramid, you know, which was just fantastic. That was a real eye-opener, that band, you know. I really had to work hard. I had to practice. I had to woodshed in order to even get anywhere near playing that stuff.
For people who don't know the band, just tell us about some of the band members.
Okay, well, Pyramid consisted of David Jones on drums and David Hirschfelder keyboards. And they were like in their early 20s. They were the young lions. I mean, those guys were just amazing back then. Nothing could stop them. They were like wild horses, you know, leading the charge. I call them the young lions, you know. They were bulletproof, those guys, and everything that they played. And of course, Bob Vinier on flugelhorn, who had a very respected career as a session musician, did a lot of television, who actually went on to play the beautiful flugelhorn solo on the end of Reminiscing is Bob Vinier as well. It's funny how your life gets interchanged like that, you know. Yeah, that was a pretty amazing band, very challenging musically, but well, it was a wonderful, wonderful time, and it really made me the player that I am today. The 3 years of that band raised my playing level incredibly. You know, my technique changed. I had to readdress my technique in order to play that fast and a lot of notes, you know. It also taught me to be fearless on stage, you know. I love a band. I'm playing in a band, and you know, you're playing in a band and you sense that a shipwreck is about to occur. Everyone's got a look of sheer panic on their faces going, we don't know where we are in the song, how we're going to finish. Well, I actually revel in that situation. I will grab the bull by the horns and go, okay guys, follow me. As a bass player, I learnt that you can do that. When the band starts to fall apart because somebody's forgotten something, if the bass player is strong, he can harmonically lead the band back on track, you know.
Which brings us to one of your, I imagine one of your most proud moments, John Farnham, and You're the Voice.
Yeah. Well, that was truly once again a wonderful milestone in my career. That one recording has given me incredible kudos. That one recording has kept the phone ringing over the years, you know. Not quite to the extent of Pino Palladino when he played bass on Wherever I Lay My Hat. I saw an article about Pino, and he said when he did that and played that incredible solo intro, he said, when I left the studio, I didn't know whether it was going to make the record or not, but of course it opened the recording, didn't it? And he said the phone hasn't stopped ringing since that one song hit the airwaves. It's amazing.
Tell me about the session and how you come up with those parts.
Right, yeah. Just to see, the weird thing is that picture this. This is the weird changes that happen in your life. You know, I've done LRB, I've done Stars, I've done recording sessions. Now I'm in Pyramid, and we ended up going to the Montreux Jazz Festival in '83. That was like a highlight, and we were extremely well received to the point where we could have really launched ourselves as an international band on the level of Weather Report. You could just feel the groundswell, you know. And so we did that, and after we'd done Montreux, I think we had one more gig, David Hirschfelder informed us that he was leaving Pyramid and he was joining Little River Band. And that was just like a stake through my heart. I go, no, not again. This band has come around, you know, almost 10 years, 8 years later. So David goes off, we come back, I come back. It's like, for a period there I was working with Trevor Courtney and Lisa Edwards. It was a techno band. I'd given everything away, and we're programming sequences, playing keyboards, and, you know, carrying on like that. And Hirschfelder was an LRB, and of course they started recording You're the Voice. And I think it was Hirschfelder that suggested that they decided that they needed some real bass on You're the Voice, or they needed a bass player on a couple of tracks. Everything else was programmed. So they asked me into Studio one night. It was a late night session. There was Doug Brady, Ross Fraser, and Farnham, and me, and I walked in with a couple of basses, and they brought the track up. There was an unmixed state, obviously, but they had, like, you could hear the song, you could hear the wall of vocals in the chorus, so it was kind of stripped back, but it didn't have any bass on it. And even in its unmixed state, you could just tell that this song was going to be a massive hit. You know, so once again, I'm sitting there pinching myself. So we recorded the song in reverse order. They'd had nothing in the verses. They dabbled putting bass on there, and because the bass drum is so big in the mix, that boom, boom thing, you put bass in there and it would just kind of get lost. You couldn't play anything against it, and if you played with the kick drum, it just kind of didn't do much, you know. So they said, well, let's do the choruses. So they spooled forward to the choruses, and I had my fretless on by the stage, and that big drum fill that leads into the chorus, into the chorus, I just played this octave glissando run up to the F, and started playing more like a droney bagpipe. When you listen to my bass part, it sits in the upper mid-range. I'm not down the bottom providing bottom end. The kick drum's doing that. I'm up in the middle, kind of playing counterlines and moving and sliding and fifths, because I'd heard the bagpipe solo and it had this slight Celtic vibe about it. And when you play fifths on an acoustic, sorry, on a fretless, it sounds like the drone on a bagpipe. So I think I was emulating that. So I'd done all the choruses and all the stuff, and then they said, well, look, let's go back to the first verse and just see what you come up with. So they roll it, and of course we all know the intro. It starts with the hand claps, and then the piano riff starts, and of course 8 bars have gone past, and I thought, I better play something, you know. And so I played that first. Sorry, as he reaches for his bass, so I played that. That was the first lick I played, and then I thought, well, I'll just keep playing. So I'm just improvising, and that was a one-take improvise, which is amazing. We kind of played licks right up to where the bass comes into the chorus, and they stopped the stop button and turned around and went, that is a keeper. I said, don't want me to do it again? Nope. I said, can I double it? That's the old trick, doubling your line, you know, just to make it stick out a bit more. And they said, no, let's just keep it like that. So that was a one-take improvisation. Who knows where it came from, but yeah.
You mentioned David Hirschfelder, who was famous for his soundtrack work, but you also work with film soundtracks. Tell me about the film music that you worked on, and how different is it to working on normal recordings?
Oh, well, look, some film music like A Cry in the Dark or Evil Angels, that was more with an orchestra. So I was playing along with the orchestra and sometimes rhythm section and orchestra. It can be pretty intimidating playing with an orchestra. You know, an orchestra tends to have a life of its own, and even though there can be a conductor, they tend to play like rock musicians. When you got a click, click, a rock musician will play their note bop, bop, right there on the downbeat, whereas an orchestra will tend to play yeah, their downbeat is almost when the batten's coming up. So as a rock, so you've got to kind of take a big deep breath and relax and breathe with the orchestra. The first few times I was shitting myself. It's really intimidating, you know. You realise that, you know, I'm a rock musician in there with my long hair, you know, and these are studied musicians that are masters of their instruments, you know, so it can be pretty intimidating. As opposed to doing something like Hogan, I had a mental blank. Crocodile Dundee. Now that was a different approach. That was with Peter Best. So that was like doing a commercial for Slip Slop Slap. You know, he'd have his click track and he'd have a few chords and go, I'd like you to play this, play that. And so we'd work through stuff and record them, bits, various cues, you know, and kind of make stuff up as opposed to every note being written, you know. It was a bit more creative input. Yeah, it's fun doing movies because sometimes you do a scene and then you go into the studio and then you look at the time-coded reference, the visual to what you've played, you know. Yeah, good fun.
Another band that you've been with for quite some time is Geoff Achison and the Soul Diggers.
I am a soul digger.
You are a soul digger. Just recently had a big anniversary.
We keep having them because we're that old.
What is it about playing with that band that you like?
Oh, look, it's got shades of Pyramid with Geoff, because Geoff plays blues, but he loves extending and he loves jamming, and he gives his musicians enough rope to hang yourself, you know. In that regard, he never he doesn't like, look, we're just playing a blues and we're just doing a 12-bar round and round and round. Even though Geoff's songs are blues based, some of them are an odd time, some are reggae, they're quirky. He's got some really interesting quirky songs and he's got funky stuff. So I love working with Geoff. He just plays from the heart. You know, he gets on stage, he hates organising a set list. Sometimes he has to, but he doesn't like that. He likes to get on stage, get a feel for the room, how he feels, and he'll launch into a song, and you never quite know what the next one's going to be. I mean, I've worked with him so long now that when he finishes a song, he might tell a story and play some little noodle licks. And by those noodles, I know what the next song's going to be. You just kind of get a sense of it, you know. Yeah. He's a wonderful musician, Geoff, and a fine bass player too. That was his first instrument. He used to play bass with Dutch. Yeah.